Hey, what's up, GTM listeners? Thanks everyone for listening this year. It's been an awesome year. We've done about 40 episodes this year, and I've personally learned a ton. So thank you for all the guests that have come on. It's been super awesome. And before we get into 2024, which we have some exciting stuff coming in 2024, which I'll talk about in a couple weeks, I want to highlight kind of the top 10 conversations I've had this year. So I'm going to break it out in the next 2 weeks, 5 conversations each. Make it super easy for you to binge these conversations, kind of combine them all that you can listen to them. These conversations, it was hard to pick because I've learned so much, and I definitely recommend you go and look at the conversations we've had this year because I've really gone through all the different areas of go-to-market and the emerging trends we've seen and kind of the top areas of opportunities for you to grow in 2023 and in 2024. So definitely go look at the conversations, but I'm going to be focused on the top 10 over the next 2 weeks. So you can kind of get the best of the best, in my opinion. But that being said, I learned so much. This has been such a cool project for me personally. Not only is it great to create content, to network, build my audience, etc., but I learned something from it every single week personally. So thank you for all the guests that have come on, and definitely check out those other conversations. Let's jump into the first one I want to highlight. And thanks for listening. And we'll also see you next week. Thanks, Shawn, for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me, Taylor. Excited to dive in.
Let's do it. Sweet. So Shawn and I met probably under a year ago, and he's a VP of partnerships at Flip. And I was picking his brain around partnerships, and I thought, especially in the way the world is going with everyone focusing on go-to-market efficiency, I thought, let's start off the show with talking about partnerships and strategic partnerships. So, Shawn, kind of run through with me, how do you define strategic partnerships? If no one has ever heard of that term before, especially in the B2B world, let's talk about that.
Sure, Taylor. Well, let's ladder up what a partnership is, and then strategic partnerships, and a buzzy word that has gone around in our times, ecosystem. What do these three terms mean? Partnership, in a simple way to think about it, is a mutually beneficial relationship between two parties. They want to invest and nurture in the relationship. So in the B2B space, or even in the e-commerce space that I operate in, two technology providers, they want data to flow, they want to share customers or opportunities, they form a partnership. When you then go on to a strategic partnership, this is a relationship that has the potential to expand the business beyond its four walls and help them potentially grow a new revenue stream, discover a new way to market or to grow with market, or even at some point result in some strategic outcomes. We may think about a merger, an acquisition, an investment. So in some other spaces, we often call them business development, in the sense that it really is the top priority for the company. And ultimately, the CEO is the business developer because she or he is the one who really grows the company. Somebody like myself is identifying those strategic partnerships and conversations that we could invest in that may pay a 10x return. So the difference in being strategic is the outsized return you could get if you find a right strategic partner, land it well, and you both really lean into it. And then for ecosystem, think of it as the economy around which your partners, your strategic partners are operating in. So because it is an economy, everybody is benefiting from it. Obviously, you are providing a service, you're providing a product. Your partners and strategic partners are either consulting, offering to help customers access that, or maybe even working with you to extend your product so more people can get their hands on it. I think of that as an ecosystem. And while the maturity of it varies, none of us disagrees that when you see it, you know it is there. It is that circle, it is the influence, it is the direct impact on how you do business and speak with your customers, your community. And it's certainly something that in this day and age, this year, we can't speak enough about it.
No doubt, Shawn. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And you actually pinged me this quote from a JP Morgan event, and I'm going to paraphrase, but essentially the quote is, "The only way to get through 2023 is locking arms and forming trust-based relationships and feeling like I can trust the other person on the other side that we're working together with." And I think and that was kind of all the whole idea, and the whole article was around partnerships and how can we build strategic partnerships with folks that are eventually serving the same customer base, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately serving the same ideal customer base. How can we partner together to be more efficient, to go to market together? Tell me about one thing, actually, when we talked, the last time we talked, you helped me frame some definitions under the partnership world. Yeah. And the definitions are, so kind of going into the partnership world of there's co-marketing, co-selling, and I really love the co-inventing. Tell me more about those definitions and what those mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously for the marketers in our midst, you are super familiar with your brand story, telling your brand story, or a marketing campaign and the various tactics that are involved. But in this trust economy, what is building more trust and what enables accounts to respond to you with more speed, more reliable aspect of it than if they knew you're already working with somebody, one of the 7 or 8 providers they use in that relationship, and you're there. So that social proof is there, that data flow is there, the ability for them, you want them to speak to those other 6 or 7 partners who then say, Taylor's absolutely got it. His team has what we need to deliver this, so you should absolutely jump headfirst into this. That does so much to advocate for you working together. So that's the why. And when you think about the co's, the COs, as I call it, co-marketing, co-selling, co-inventing, what that layers on is the partner angle, where when you bring a brand story, or even when you bring a campaign, or even when you're running a virtual event, you do that with a partner, because then both your audiences are there, both your stories and your themes are there, and your shared voice is something that says to the audience, this isn't a sales pitch. This is how it works together. For more technically inclined folks, maybe there is a data flow or integration that makes this so compelling. This is so easy, and we just have to get on it tomorrow. So co-marketing is really the partner involvement and even partner-led, if I would say, angle, where you put your partner first and foremost, the story and the narrative then forms from it. Co-selling, in the past, a lot of teams are thinking of a lone wolf mindset. Let's just put our reps at this. Let's just let our sales development or business development reps go sell cold outreach or email marketing. But then doesn't it help when 2 very aligned partners actually do an account plan, actually reach out with a coherent shared message to an account and says, you can certainly go look at us in isolation, but if you look at 2 of these together, and I could certainly use analogies that marketers would well recognize, email marketing software and a CRM, and you put it together, that message is a solution for you. We're not just giving you a software, giving you a product. We understand the job that you need to do, and together we're offering to help you do it in a different way. If it were me, that wasn't a pitch, but I'm more convinced I would be receptive to a co-sold angle and value that 2 providers are coming. And then co-inventing takes on the product angle, where, yes, we can certainly go build our product and think we are be all and end all in itself. But you know the truth, that's not the case. How rapidly somebody adopts us or is willing to partner and work with us is also a function of what all they need. And so very often we cannot build, there's a limit on development resources, technical resources. We cannot build it all ourselves. So if I were to work with a partner, and over the past 2 weeks, I have shared, even with friends and my audience on LinkedIn, we had 2 recent wins where if it were not for the co-inventing with those 2 partners, and I'm in the e-commerce space, so you can understand, if your customer buys a product from you, you don't know who they are and you don't know what they bought, that's not very helpful because that's not a relationship of trust. That's not something that you can continue to show value with. So in that case, we have to co-invent with those 2 partners, develop an integration. That means both product teams are actually thinking, how can we build these 2 bricks together so that it leads your listener, so it leads your customer to walk towards this shared vision, that co-inventing. That, I would say, does involve the most resources, but when you get there, that value is very immediately recognizable. I have another story I can share about that, but I know we have a lot we want to. Sure. So co-inventing not only helps you acquire new customers when you think about here's an integration, immediate value, time savings. Nobody is going to skip on this opportunity. Even from a usage and retention basis, and I know this year we're thinking about retention large on our mind. I worked years back on a technology partnership with Zoom. Zoom video is ubiquitous now. Everybody knows it. But back in those days, it was the early innings of video conferencing, and we were in a recruiting platform. So we said, let's bind recruiting and Zoom together so you could have a virtual conversation the way we're having now, or you could interview a candidate without needing her or him to fly into that conference room in the Bay Area or in New York City. Seemed pretty amazing in those times. So we launched that. But here's the truth. What happened was within weeks, 30% of the entire enterprise customer base of the startup I was working in adopted it. So now you not only have the co-inventing, you have customers saying, this was clear all the while. The same way when you design the iPhone or the iPad, we didn't know we needed it, but when you put it out there, we immediately latched onto it. So there is some very clear validation when you co-invent something that has value, that makes it easy, pretty much a no-brainer that customers can raise their hands and say, I'm all over this.
I love it. Thanks for sharing, Shawn. Great story. And I love, I think a word that kind of stuck out was not doing your go-to-market plan or strategy in isolation. And whether you're doing a co-marketing initiative where you're doing a webinar or a blog post or an ebook collaboration where you're creating some sort of marketing collaboration together, or where you're co-selling and your AEs are going into the same account together, or whether you're co-inventing, you're not doing it in isolation, because we all know our customers don't purchase, maybe just one product or one service. It's, they have a whole, whether a tech stack or, a whole myriad of different solutions they're looking at. And so I think it's actually the best customer experience is when you're looking at, hey, how does my product fit into the rest of our customers' ecosystem of products, right? And then now leveraging that of like understanding. I'd love to hear from you as well as, and this actually wasn't on our list of agenda questions, but I just thought of it you mentioned things like, working with the product teams or working with sales. It seems to me that product partnerships, or partnerships in general, rely heavily on the entire organization being behind it. How do you get that buy-in? How do you kind of paint the vision for it? And I know a very easy question, but just curious, how do you get the ball rolling? Even how do you get started with it when it comes to getting the ball rolling there?
Yeah, I think the two things that have really stuck out for me are starting small and starting early. And when you think about starting small, we need to create these aha moments within our team. Each one of us obviously wants to work with partners. That's why everybody is listening on our chat. But we need to have everybody internally in our immediate team. It's like an atomic unit within our wider team within the company actually see that have that light bulb moment that, if we work with a partner, that's going to make our story believable. That's going to make our story and our product more accessible. That is absolutely the way to build trust without seeming like we're cold pitching an account. So it starts small, whereby if there are stories, if you're coming into a net new situation, you have to socialize those stories within your team. Here's how I've worked with partners in the past. It's not perfect, but it really extends our reach. It extends our ability to tell our brand story. It extends our ability to, I love what you were saying earlier, live in market. If I don't understand the group of tools and solutions that our audience uses, how can I speak with them with any credibility? I have to live in that ecosystem they live in. So that's the starting point. So sharing those stories, and then when you have that first win, to share it and say, this is how we are winning internally, and therefore we are winning with our partners. So starting small. Now, starting early, this may be a hot take or a controversial aspect. I've heard views that say, you should not start your partner program when you're too early. You should do it when you're later, when you have your product market fit, when you have your business plans all defined. So I put an alternative view out there. I think if you don't start now, then when? We talked about that JP Morgan General Catalyst or Andreessen quote. The point is, when you start thinking about that, you are thinking about leverage. You are thinking about points where you can do a lot more with less. So even if you don't have a formalized partner program, or for folks who are listening in, how do I get started? I would say you just have to get started. If you're in a role where your title may not formally say partnerships, but you have a partnering mindset, that is day one. That is the ability to see, how can I, on a content front, how can I, on a campaign, how can I, certainly for those who want to go down the integration and product route, how can we think about building that together with an external partner so that we can now, they'd be excited, we're excited, and best of all, the audience and the customer is saying, where were you both all this time? I was waiting to hear this shared story for you. So starting small and then starting early is often that first step, because we won't get it right the first time, right? I talked about the co-marketing, the co-selling, and the co-inventing. Sure, we can build some processes. Sure, we can design some playbooks, but everybody's voice, every company's voice, how you partner, that sweet spot of how two companies say their story together is going to take some testing. So if you start earlier, don't you think you would have a better chance to align your voices, figure out how you both go at it together? I think that is the logical way. And that's not saying you are investing a ton of resources up front, but you are thinking about it. You are thinking and being planful and thoughtful about, how can we partner internally? How can we work externally?
I love that, Shawn. That's great. Thanks for sharing. And I think any go-to-market strategy will probably cost more and take longer than you probably are anticipating, especially in this day and age. And partnerships, in my experience, is no exception. It takes a while to develop the relationships with said partner, but then it also, to your point, I love what you mentioned, testing, right? It takes a while to figure out what does the partnership look like. And
absolutely.
On that note, where would you recommend folks start? Co-marketing, co-selling, co-inventing? Where do you recommend folks have no partnership program in place? Where do you recommend them starting?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's one starting point, and then there are two approaches or two directions that folks can go. The starting point is really to look where your customer lives, or your customer, or some think of it as the broader community with a capital C. Some prospects are there. So look where your customers live. What are their must-have solutions? So if you level it up, what are the jobs that your customer or account is trying to do? And as a result of that, what are the 3 to 4? That doesn't seem too many. You can increase it 5 to 7 tools and solutions that they have to use. So these are tools and solutions that they would use in conjunction with your product, either before, at the same time, or after. And so those are probably good candidates for you to start thinking about partnerships. And there are two things when I reflect on my journey with partnerships. Any partner you work with must both be interested and able to work with you. It seems pretty simple. Interest is usually there when you serve a common account or customer or type of customer. But the ability is something where it takes time. The same way, if you were to invest in a venture with a new business partner, you need to suss them out. You need to understand what makes them tick. Is our way of working at it the same? Our energy and our approach that we bring to it. So you need some time to determine the ability of that partner. And the sooner you start, the better. So figure out where your customers live in market. But now the two directions to go, and I've seen this, and I recommend one over the other. One is a broad-based approach. Let's just all work with anyone and everybody, and let's welcome everybody to partner with us. Now, the good thing is you get to know the landscape pretty well. You start to realize, all right, this is the length, breadth, and the depth of everyone that's living where my customer is living. But then the other is you can do it the same way. You're open for business and partnering, but you pick the 5 or 10. So what you are doing is over-indexing on quality, indexing on time and attention, and you spend that most time with those 5 to 10, depending on the size of your team. And let's even break it down even lower. If you are that person starting it, because you're tuning in and thinking, how can I help bring about some partnering instincts? How can I get us started on our first step towards our partner journey? That is a good way to go. Find those 3 to 5 partners where you are aligned, start to understand their message, how they speak about themselves and their product, and then reach out and say, we are thinking about our partner program. Here's the tough thing. Everybody wants results. We agree. But the ability to say, we're not going to pre-dictate where this partnership goes. Do we co-market? Do we co-sell? Do we co-invent? But what resonates with you? What are your goals? So you start that giving, the part of the partnership that is critical is at some point you will benefit each other. There's some taking and benefiting, but that ability to give and say, how can I help you market? How can I help you speak to your audience? How can I help you put your brand voice out there? That becomes critical because the moment they reciprocate, you realize the interest is there. You realize, oh, there's some ability for them to amplify what we're working on. And that, I would say, those are the first steps towards getting a partnership in place. So that focus approach, you're open for business and partnering, but you're going to double down on those handful that really matter and align with what you're doing. I recommend that approach to begin with. That way you can also share internally, hey, everyone, here are the partners that we're closely aligned with. As you can see, it's had a short but immediate impact on how we work with the customer, how we speak, and how we do business. Isn't that helpful? That show and tell, I think, is the most impactful.
Super cool, Shawn. Thank you. I love that as far as having a broad base approach of allowing a lot of folks into your programs, but being as far as how much internal resources you're dedicating 100%. To developing those specific partnerships, be really strategic, especially starting out. As I've, like most, any sort of marketing initiatives or growth initiatives, go-to-market initiatives, it takes a lot of effort, to get them started and going. And so on that note, how do you measure ROI as it relates to these programs and these three different areas of partnerships? Sure.
So when you mentioned that, the first thing to note is we talked about co-marketing, co-selling, and co-eventing. And implied in those three co-activities or partner-led activities is the fact that your internal team, your marketing team, your sales team, or your product team is bought in or willing to extend that olive branch and say, yeah, let's just go march forward together with this partner. So I want to emphasize that understanding what your internal teams are aligned to. Is marketing looking for sales qualified leads, or certainly marketing qualified leads in the top of the funnel? Is sales looking for opportunities, enterprise conversations? Is your product team looking for automation? Are they looking for those metrics? You have to keep that in mind. So it's not your own metrics. Hey, I have the whole partner land laid out, and those are the 3 milestones. Your internal partner team that helps you work on the codes is critical. Because if your marketing team is bought in as being a marketing leader yourself, there's going to be so much you can do in partnership with marketing, in concert with your partner. Now, to your point about ROIs, the more quantitative, the better. Because it becomes really transparent that you're trying to, in your own way, carry the quota, if you think about it. And I know that will spawn a longer discussion. So if I say, as a partner program, I can't tell for the first quarter, I'm just getting it off the ground. But starting in month 4 or 5 or 6, we're going to account for, I draw a line in the sand, dollars X of sourced revenue and some dollars Y potentially of influence, or put it in a bucket together. Now this becomes interesting because you are willing to take a shot and you lay out how you estimate and project that. But you're saying, I'm going to be carrying the quota, and my partners are working with me to be creative to deliver some results. So the thing about ROI, the more measurable in this time, the better. I would caveat that by saying we do need realistic expectations. You're not going to deliver that on day one. The forecast is probably going to be a little off with some error bars. And it's going to be refreshing to anyone who has not worked with partnerships in this way to see, wow, this partner person or this person with that partnering mindset is actually interested to put some dollars on the line. And now you start to have a conversation around, well, she or he is really quite the owner. They're trying to build this external arm, external part of our business, but they're also trying to contribute in ways that we understand, metrics that we are accountable for. So how can we support them? I always feel that is the beginning of working together.
Thanks, Shawn. That's awesome. Well, I'm sure we could talk for another 2 hours at least around this, and maybe we'll have you back on this show. But we are out of time. How can people connect with you and follow you?
Sure. Please definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I post regularly about partnerships, ecosystem-led growth, and then startup life, because very often partners that you journey with, that you live with, understand nothing is perfect. But if you're building out in public, you're learning with them, they are very, very open and willing to be part of that story and that journey. Happy to share, Taylor, and obviously happy to elaborate on any one of those topics. And I would say this, if there's one takeaway, just get started. Partnering on involves the first step. And when you start to do that internally, you find the courage, you find the direction, and you find the ideas to go work more definitively on that externally. So that is the encouragement and message I would share with everyone tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shawn. I really appreciate your time. Go give him a follow. I'll put the links in the notes to reach out to Shawn. Worth a follow. I learn something new from you all the time. Thanks again, Shawn, for coming on. I appreciate
so much,
it.
Taylor. Excited.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the GTM.news show. I got Jordan Crawford here today. Thanks, Jordan, for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, kind of give the audience some context. Jordan and I have actually been following you probably for a year and a half now. Seen you around the interwebs, and most recently came across a post you posted in a Pavilion community Slack group. And it was all around this idea of your company, Blueprint, does what I'm kind of coining, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit today, is almost like hyper personalization at scale. In the context of really outbound strategies, cold email in particular. So today we're going to be talking a bunch about that. I think your strategy, your approach is pretty unique. I haven't come across your process before. So one thing that came up, kind of first question we can talk about is, and you have a video I think on YouTube on this, which I watch, which is kind of having a pain versus persona when it comes to outbound, cold email, that whole world. Let's start there, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for. I mean, it's a little. It's interesting to be reminded how long I've been posting content on LinkedIn, and so I'm grateful that you've been watching my stuff. Yeah, the thing I think that a lot of teams get wrong about just thinking holistically about their go-to-market is that they're targeting incorrectly. And this is usually because the data sets that you have access to are not really aligned to the problem that you solve. And so this is like you'll download a list from ZoomInfo, right? And you'll say, I care about companies that are 10 to 1,000 employees that are in the United States. And it's like, okay, so, what you used to do is you should be able to just spam all those folks, right? Well, that doesn't work anymore. And outbound is much, much harder. And the thing that you need to think about is, what is the perfect list for me? And the best way to reverse into this question is really assume that your founder, the person with the most context on who you sell to, had unlimited time for research to build a list, right? Unlimited time to look at the company website, look at public data sources, look through LinkedIn, look through content. Like, it doesn't actually matter where that information is. What is the perfect email that they would write? And then what you need to do is reverse into, how do I get that data at scale and enrich a company with that information? And if you do that, then you have eliminated most of those companies in your TAM, because you have said, I know A, B, C, D, E, F, and G about these companies. And together it paints this really, really rich picture that if you were to audit this list, if you were to look at 9 out of 10 of these domains, the founder, the head of sales, the head of CS, the person that knows your customer best, like, that is our exact customer. And that's what teams are doing wrong, is that they're not investing in that scoring mechanism. They're not thinking about it from the other way, which is not personalization. It's targeting, not personalization. Personalization is a token word that is about, how do you talk that Jordan has a blue hat? Oh, Jordan, you have a blue hat. Do you want to buy my SaaS? It's like, no, it has nothing to do with your problem. And there's a lot of AI tools that'll do this for you. So I think that that's the crux of the issue, is that we don't spend enough time on both data and first principle scoring of which companies at what stage in their sort of pain journey, if you will, need you now.
Fascinating. I like that differentiator between kind of hyper targeting versus hyper personalization.
Yes.
Thanks for clarifying that. I'm already going to change the title of the podcast now. But that's great. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, I think I can totally relate in my journey of go-to-market strategies and whatnot with it, which has been, especially with data, where I feel like, with the Zoom Infos of the world, that was almost a competitive advantage 10 years ago, right? And now everyone has access to it. There is 1,000 Zoom Info providers out there. And so now what's your competitive advantage when it comes to your outbound strategy? So let's get into kind of some of the nitty gritty. I'd love for you to share with the audience what specific campaigns, maybe what sort of criteria has been super helpful in that targeting. Love to kind of dive deep into that.
Well, I want to talk, I'm going to give you an example, but before I do that, I'm going to talk about a way for you to invert your thinking about targeting. These large company lists from the Zoom Info, the Apollos of the world, they're great as bowling lanes. They will not help you get a strike, but they will make sure that you don't throw your bowling ball into the ceiling, right? You're like, all right, this is you're not going to go over 4 lanes over and get into Terry's lane, right? That's a great data set to just say, for sure, not these companies, right? So it's like, it's here, but I don't know where in here it is. But then you need to invert your thinking from a problem-based targeting and not a company-based targeting. And so, like, for example, my company scrapes jobs. So every day we look at hundreds of thousands of websites, say, what are they hiring? Now, the unsophisticated seller would say, oh, they're hiring a bunch of BDRs. Go after them, right? Well, let's think about Orem, for example. They're like an AI call tool. It's not just a sales team, right? It's a sales team that does a lot of cold calling, right? So you're looking for cold calling in a lot of their reps. You're looking for the number of reps that they're adding. You might even look at the number of reps they already have on the account to understand how advanced is their sort of cold calling. You might even look for keywords that say, start cold calling or like cold calling campaign. A head of sales position might say hire reps to help with cold calling, right? So you know where they are on their journey. And then inside those job descriptions, there's a lot more nuance, which it'll talk about things like, think about the software. So like really advanced teams that are doing really heavy cold calling are using words like auto dialer, or they're thinking about like callbacks, or just they have a bunch of other specific keywords that talk about cold calling specifically. So when I build TAM lists for my customers, I look at my jobs data and I say, let's look at all of the companies that mention any slew of these keywords to identify how advanced of callers are they, what types of technology are they using, and that level of targeting not only helps eliminate a lot of companies, but it gives you messaging for free because you can speak about the problems they're talking about. A job description is $100,000 hand raise that say, I have a big problem, and here are all the specifics of my problem. So this is just one way that you can invert your thinking from building company lists to building problem-based list of companies.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. It's almost like the thing I keep on thinking about as you talk through identifying almost different. It's almost like a maturity level of pain. Like, what's their pain maturity, right? Is it more, maybe in the case of the the BDR situation, is it maybe more of a rudimentary, maybe more of a legacy, or are they actually more, are they further along the maturity model, and then talking to that pain depending on where they are in that particular pain. And then the data set of job descriptions is pretty cool as far as being able to then take all of that and then, tailor your messaging to their specific needs.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say too is that you're not going to speak to a company that has just started cold calling the same as you will one that has a whole team that is scaled that motion up, that has, right? You're not going to say like, have you thought about a system to like record your calls? And they're like, come on, like you're going to read that as a receiver of that message and think like, did you not do any research on me? Whereas if you send a message to that person, they're doing the most advanced cold calling tactics, and you say like, hey, Jordan, other teams like you were doing these exact same tactics, but what they didn't know is A, B, C, and D. And you're like, whoa, like I didn't know that. And we're the top of our game. So you can take information, and this is something that other people get wrong, is that in go-to-market teams, they think it's a game of attention when now it's a game of education. and really showing versus telling. And that all comes from your existing customers. And to give you like another flavor, I have a customer right now that they do their e-com ML checkout tool. So basically you go to one of these large retailers and they're running like thousands of ML tests, like determine when they should offer $5 off, right? $10 off or 10% off, right? Well, you can imagine the first cut of their TAM is like any e-commerce company doing over $10 million a year or whatever, right? Well, the best thing I can say with that information is, hey, Taylor, I saw you're making money. I have machine learning thing. Can I have some of your money? Like, that's like the best thing I could say because that's all I know about you, right? Well, let's get a layer deeper. What we're doing for them is like, do they have pop-ups on their site? Do the pop-ups mention % off or dollars off? Do they have strike-throughs in their pricing? Do they have limited time sales? If you go to the checkout, are there what kind of elements are on the checkout, right? So now I know which brands are discounting. I can then enrich with traffic, right? So it doesn't matter if, you can't use this product if you don't have a lot of traffic, right? Not enough experimentation, right? So I have that additional layer. Then I can also go and match categories. So I can pull categories of products out, which is like, okay, do categories that they have data on match with categories that you're selling, right? And so you can kind of imagine that as you peel back the layers of the onion, you can start to say something like, hey, Taylor, I saw that you sell men's hoodies, specifically this brand of fat hoodie. And I don't know if you know this, but we've run 23,568 tests on this exact hoodie. And it turns out that if you give 5% off in these conditions, that you'll have a 120% increase in your cart checkout rate. This is one of a million things that I know. I'll send you 6 more for free after running checkouts on X number of campaigns. Take it, go. Like, enjoy this, right? And so you can start to see now, I don't have to say anything about machine learning. I don't have to throw any buzzwords. I don't have to be like, can we get on a call, please? I'll do anything. I'm begging you, please take a call. I'm like, here's some value for you that's based on my earned insight that my customers have trusted me to find for them. Maybe you might trust me here, but if not, go and try this on your own. So I'm surfacing the data that customers have, that my customers have about their customers to the market.
That's so cool, Jordan. Like we're now getting into this kind of almost phase 2 or this next level of what I think your approach is super awesome. I think number one is obviously the hyper targeting, right? Which is what we've already talked about of like, hey, finding folks that are the perfect fit and matching up, whether it's just data that's public available data off their website. And I'm sure we can talk, maybe if we have a few more minutes today, we can talk more about the other data sets you use to kind of be able to have that hyper targeting. But in addition to that, you're doing, and I've actually been even recently, I'm sure you're familiar with 0-click content on social media.
No, I've never heard of this phrase.
So this is an idea that actually SparkTuro, which is a great company, I recommend everyone following, great product. It's a SEO research product. They've coined this term. I don't know if they've coined it, but they've definitely popularized it. The idea is you create content that requires that's in-app consumption. The idea is that you create it for that medium, right? So if you're creating content on social media, don't send them to a website to download an ebook, or don't send them to YouTube or whatever. Create it for that platform so they can consume it easily, consume it quickly. They get the value. You build that brand repetition and all that fun stuff. What you're doing is you're creating zero click content for email outbound, where you're actually providing value through email. And this is, I love this concept. And I've actually used a similar concept in almost what I kind of coined, which was like an inbound outbound approach, where we would basically send content to prospects, like invite them to a webinar, and you're doing exactly the same thing, but you're saying, hey, here's what you can do. Here's what we've done for other folks, right? Building that reputation, building that brand awareness, but then you're also providing value outside of ever even having to book a meeting, outside of ever even having to engage with the brand. You're just helping them in the email, and no one else is doing that. I haven't received one cold email where somebody is like, here's some free knowledge, maybe an invite to a webinar, right? I've seen a little bit of that. Invite to an event. But I think it's super cool, Jordan. Like, this this has to be where outbound and cold email goes, where instead of just asking for that meeting, which is what everyone's doing, you're actually providing value in that engagement.
Yeah, that's and this is not hard, it's just complex. So it's not, there's just 86 steps, which is like why my agency exists. It's like, look, you're not going to take these 86 steps, but I will. And so the challenge is right now is that to get a perfect idea of an email all the way to a shipped email, there's all this crap in between. It's like, well, deliverability and like, are you hitting spam inboxes? And then like, how do you get the people? And like, how do you clean the data? And then how do you make sure the emails are good? And then how do you combine 3 or 4 different data sets? Like, this is complicated. So what people do is just like throw a bunch of SDRs at it. Just let a human figure it out. It's too complicated. Can't figure it out. But I think the new model is more invest in a data team, get an AI ML scientist, get a scraper, get one AE that's not paid on commission, that just you pay them some high hour, some high rate to like do the very, very last mile stuff or take the calls, etc. And you really need you need both kind of a data team as well as someone on the strategy side. And then you do kind of need an executor to be able to respond to folks, to like quickly, if you get a reply to the email, to cold call them, to like, just like be on top of that reply as fast as possible. So there is still a human component as part of this. It's the very last piece of the mile. It's none of the research. It's none of the deliverability stuff. It's not like sending emails manually. So there's still a role for, of course, sales to play, but really it's doing a lot of that work ahead of time, the research, the data. And then once you've done that, then you have to figure how do you get that market to message and deploy across channels, right? You had mentioned this before the show. It's like, how do you then operationalize that? Well, the first step is to narrow that, really, really, really narrow that TAM. So it's like, if an expert looked at 50 domains in your list, they're like, perfect. Like that's the bar.
I love it. Super cool. So tell me about, we've kind of talked about the strategy, and I think I'm definitely aligned. The strategy is awesome between the hyper targeting and then also that providing value through that email, through that cold email exchange. Tell me about what are the other kind of sticking points of like what's even from your agency, like obviously creating the strategy is one part of it. There's the data piece. What are the other building blocks that are hard to execute? From your end, and where does your agency really provide value in that?
That's a great question. I think the very hardest thing is finding a person that really has a good view of the person's market. I'll work with. I won't call him out by name because we have a friendly feud. We like each other, but he's always giving me hell. But he's a very prominent market leader, and I'm like, who's your perfect? They had a new product. I'm like, who's your perfect fit? He's like, Jordan, it's like every SaaS company. And I was like, get out of here. Like, you leave the room. So I went to the founder. I'm like, come on, man, who is really this? And he's like, well, it's these categories, and it's only companies with a demo, and it's only companies that are selling into the mid-market, and it's only companies that have a complex demo that they have to give to the mid-market. So you can see much more nuanced thinking, right? And sales reps don't have this because they're incentivized wrong. So the first thing is, like, before all the tactics, you have to have someone, it's usually the founder that has been punched in the face, like, oh, we tried that niche, we tried that niche, we tried that niche. Maybe it's who's ever closest to the customer is really the person that has this understanding. And then you should sit with that person, and you need to extract everything they see when they do research. But then once you do that, you usually need bespoke scraping with some ML, ideally, to score websites. There's for almost none of my customers is there a database that I can go to that will give me that clarity for them. So that's really important. You need to sit on a data set like Apollo to be able to get people data and domains, just like to pull domains and score them. You probably need access to a tool that You can run more complex SQL queries on something like Apollo to be able to, because generally you want to ask questions like, give me all the companies with more than 5 account executives in the United States where they have hired their head of sales in the last 3 months, and in their job description it talks about you'll be our first sales leader, right? Like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. That like nuanced poll, Apollo is probably the closest that you can get to something like that, but that's the level of thing that you need to do. Then you need a mechanism to test messaging. And I know we had talked about sort of ChatGPT. ChatGPT is going to be absolutely awful if you say, write a sales email given my benefits. What it'll do is it'll take the worst version of every blog you've ever seen and give you a worse version than that. And so you need to write a message and then throw in something like I have a rubric. I've got a 10-step rubric. It's like, and I asked ChatGPT, I said, take this rubric and grade this email. Do not tell me how to fix it, because ChatGPT shit the bed when I asked it to do that. I said, just critique this email. Is it engaging? Is the subject line an incomplete thought? Yes, give them 10 points. Like, is there like at least a little bit of humor in this thing? Give them 10 points, you know? So that's the kind of way you should use ChatGPT, and to shorten what you've already written. But you should really write a message that is like super casual. Weirdly, I don't think that you need all of this, like I used to do a lot of like number stuff like this and this. I think if you get the targeting right, you can get away with any of that stuff and write a much more casual message. Hey, Taylor, I saw that you have this thing on your page, you know, here's some stats here. So really people data, good company data, you need a good scraper. You maybe need an outsourcer to do some additional cleaning. And then you need someone that is going to look with a meticulous fine-tooth comb when that data comes back before just like pushing the go button. And that person should not be incentivized in a like closed one sort of way, because they need to like, and then I will say the only thing, this is how I talk about my agency, is like fast shipping is what I sell. I sell fast testing. Every week we send it a playbook every week. So it takes about a month for us to build up some of the infrastructure for you, but then every week we ship. So it's like, we may get it wrong, but I'm going to get it wrong very fast. And I'll tell you what you think is your best perfect fit customer with the best email. I'll tell you if you got it right. I'll tell you if the market cares about your problem.
Super cool. I love that. I think 2 things that stood out is first, I think the ongoing problem of, or opportunity of identifying what your TAM is something that every organization I've ever talked to, every company I've worked in has struggled with, or it's a constantly evolving thing. So I think what I'm curious about is, when you've worked with your clients, when you've gone through this process of figuring out the hyper-targeting, and how has that influenced other teams, for example, product teams, or even kind of the overall go-to-market strategy? You kind of just hinted at it right there, as far as like, I'll tell you if, this is working or that's not working. How has, even going through this process influenced the rest of the go-to-market strategy, specifically even product, right? Like, how are they developing the product for the market?
Well, I wish I could tell you that I was a genius at like helping organizations take this data, but I'm usually just the guy in the basement, like, I'm going to run this crazy thing, So like, if I had a magic wand and I could tell my customers, stop everything you're doing and like, trust me, which I don't know that they would do that, but if they would do that, this is what I would do with the data. I would say, great, okay, we already know we've scored your entire TAM. We have nuance about your entire TAM. And in that nuance, we've also matched it to your insights. So that means that everything that you do can be 10x better. You can run, you can go pull all of the people, get their personal emails, and run ads. So they can see an ad that says like, trying to get better conversion rates on your men's jumbo hoodies. Like, here's the way to increase your conversion rate by 206%. So that's the ad that you can send to only the decision makers at only the companies that only sell hoodies. When they click on this, you can spin up a bunch of pages that have every domain in your TAM for programmatic SEO, and they can go in and see what you know about their business. So like, hey, Taylor, here's a website that is just for you, that is just for your e-commerce site. And here are the things that are matched on my data. Here's the 68 things that you could be doing better. And here are specific changes. So you can run programmatic ads. You can build programmatic SEO pages that are about your values. So anyone can come to your website, type in, and see content for them. So you don't have to be like, read my PDF and figure out how these 86 pages apply to you. It's like, I already did that work. Here's how it applies to you. You can run cold outbound. So you are now hitting people in all of the right channels. You're only hitting the people that you can sell to with messages about your problem, and you've started to deploy it to other channels. So you don't have to throw people to just throw stuff at the wall. This is a vision I haven't yet capitalized on with my customers because it is complex and it involves other things. And sometimes I don't play well with others. But I think that is, if I was the CEO at one of these companies, that's what I would do with my data.
I love it, Jordan. That's super cool. And I think there's, what I heard is if you can figure out the targeting right, figure out the messaging right, which is what this unique process goes through, you can then influence things like, I'm hearing a lot about like the term account-based marketing, right? Or even I bet there's opportunities for retention plays or expansion plays for, CS, right? Taking that data, then using that to expand. And, if they're going after a Fortune 500 company, they can now go after different offices, right? And use that kind of that positive feedback loop. Super cool. We've got a few minutes left. I'd love for you to kind of wrap up a small topic, which is kind of ROI. What do you look at? What are some kind of KPIs you look at when you're executing one of these campaigns? And I know there's a pretty broad spectrum depending on the type of organization that would use this, but maybe some KPIs of like, what are some things you look for? I know reply rate is one of them. But yeah, great.
I mean, I think that the first KPI I look at is just, are we landing in inboxes and are we getting replies? So it's like, first, like I have to know the inbox health is good. People are seeing the message. And then are we testing every week, right? Did we get it right? Did we get it right? Did we get it right? And so I really think about that throughput rate. Like, am I testing enough to know? And this is going to fail 9 times out of 10. Like the failure rate here is like, like I'm throwing a lot of words out here, but like generally when like rubber hits the road, you don't know your market really well. You don't really know, you don't know the problems that they're facing. You don't really have a good understanding. Like no one has a really perfect view of their customers or even a fuzzy view. And this is just like one way that I found to test it out. But generally, I'm looking for a 1% positive reply rate on campaigns. And if you're in a great market with a great problem where there's not a lot of competition, you do your targeting right, you could get 5%. But I try not to hinge on these numbers because I really just want to know, did I get some of the signal right? Like, am I getting the targeting right? And then I can improve that by going in other channels and that kind of stuff.
I love it. Yeah, and there's so many variables with ROI that it's and benchmarks are even not helpful because every situation is so different. And I love that as far as the constant testing.
I sell fast testing. That's what I do. Like
I love that.
I don't know. I don't know your market. I don't know your product. I don't know your audience. Like all I can give is like, if you think you know your audience, I could test that really quick and see if you got it right.
I love it. And marketing and sales and go-to-market in general, I think we probably fail more than any other department, and that's by design because you have to try a lot of different things to see what works and what works for your industry. So super cool. Jordan, thanks so much for coming on. How can people stay connected with you and get a hold of you?
I post a lot on LinkedIn. I do have a YouTube channel. I'm /Jordan Crawford or the original. I got the URL and nice. Just Jordan at blueprintgtm.com. So I'd be happy to take your emails there if you want to contact me.
Thanks, Jordan. Super worth a follow. Love your content and keep it up. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Everyone, thanks for listening to the GTM News Show. I got Leslie Barrett here today. Thanks, Leslie, for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Super great to have you. We're going to be talking in kind of some context for the audience why I brought Leslie on. We're going to be talking about customer marketing, customer advocacy. This is something that I have a passion for and have seen the effectiveness in just like overall marketing efficiency, growth, and ultimately happy customers and more growth. So Leslie, I'd love to hear in your own words, first for the audience, kind of how Leslie and I got connected as well is connect on LinkedIn. You have a bunch of great content. Encourage everyone to go on there. You have a course, an ebook, I think, in the works or coming out soon, which maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But first, I'd love for you to kind of just, for the audience, if people aren't familiar with these terms like customer marketing or customer advocacy, can you define in your own words those two areas?
Of course. Yes, you mentioned passion, and I have a lot of that in this area. I think customer marketing is like, it's evolving, right? Like I would say a couple years back, we were just looked at as, kind of fluffy and that you can't really measure and come up with the ROI of customer marketing initiatives or even the department. And we're emerging. So it's really, really exciting to see like the changes. And I hope I'm a part of that change, right? Because I'm a big advocate for this field. And that's what I post on LinkedIn and all that stuff. And actually, you're getting the exclusive because I just got a promotion yesterday.
That's right. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm the senior.
Well deserved, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was not shocked, but you're always so excited when you get something like that. Yeah. I'm the senior director of customer marketing and evangelism, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, customer marketing to me, I think when most people think about it, it encompasses everything post-purchase, and helping the customers out on their journey with the focus on building quality relationships with customers through 4 pillars, I like to say: adoption, retention, expansion, and advocacy. And that is true. I do all that, but then also a big part of customer marketing is along the sales cycle and all of the amazing stuff that customer marketers create, like case studies and reviews and video testimonials and the reference program and the referral programs, all to help accelerate deals and even bring them in. So it's a lot.
I love it. Thanks for sharing. And I love those 4 pillars. The adoption, I love, especially that, because I think a lot of folks are familiar with like, hey, how do we expand in customers? Or everyone's thinking about new revenue. Everyone's thinking about how do we get folks to maybe even advocacy. But as far as adoption and how marketing can influence the adoption of a product, the aha moments or the value, kind of the time to value ratio, it's super cool. Then all the other stuff as well, which is case studies, reviews, and even in our prep call, I remember us chatting about how there's a lot there. And it's hard to, probably juggle it all and hard to know where to focus.
Yes.
Sure. I'd love to hear from your voice too, as well as just where do you see, or maybe where did you first see kind of the aha moment when it came to customer marketing and advocacy? Like how did it click for you if you're maybe somebody like, once again, is not familiar or they're new to it, or maybe they're trying to get an executive buy-in to do customer marketing? What were the aha moments you saw that helped convince you?
Yeah, maybe 2. One, I would say back in 2016 when, it was customer advocacy has been around for like 25 years, but, just kind of like B2B SaaS customer advocacy. I started in 2016 and it started because the SaaS product or platform that I was working for, it wasn't ready yet. We're like a startup, Series A, and the product wasn't quite there. So they said, Leslie, go create a diversion and go like make a program for our customers and just like start spoiling them and make something shiny over here so that their attention will be directed over here while we work on the product. And I was like, okay. So I did it and I jumped right in. I went straight to like Influitive to learn everything I could about, how to do this and the secret sauce and all of that stuff. And so, yeah, it was like a really successful program. And I just saw that was my aha moment that like, oh my gosh, I'm retaining these customers on my own right now. Like the platform isn't even, it's like kind of working, not really, but I have, you know, a really, really strong relationship with all these customers that they're sticking by us until we're ready because I'm doing all these like fun things. And then as I progressed, I would say to kind of get a customer reference program set up really quickly, because that is where you can prove the ROI of that program so easily. I do have a newsletter episode on it. It's episode 12, I think. And it's just going to walk you through exactly how to build it all, build the sales force. You don't need any fancy platforms or anything like that. You just need Slack, maybe Salesforce, and a gifting tool. But we won't go into Sendoso today, but do recommend that as a gifting platform.
Cool. I love it. Thanks for sharing. That's, yeah. And I love, you know, just, you threw out a couple areas there that were cool. So just if I'm hearing you correctly, in your situation, you were working for a company that didn't have a product, essentially. They weren't selling anything. They had you go into the market, connect with the customers, build, I guess, almost a movement around a problem, around an idea, around something, I imagine, and build a relationship with these customers pre-product.
Yeah.
Through these evangelism activities.
Yeah, it was there, and people were seeing, you know, great success with it, but in order to scale the platform, that technology wasn't there. So I worked with the customers who were seeing value and was able to amplify their careers by partnering with our brand and doing speaking opportunities about the success that they were seeing. And so you know, marketers do that beautifully, by the way. Yes, I'm a marketer who markets to marketers, and I live life, I know. But if you notice, sometimes they could be like a marketing associate, and then they pair up with a platform and they just do success stories and speaking opportunities and PR releases. And then all of a sudden they're like the VP of marketing, because, you know, it's a personal brand, and they just kind of buddy up with a platform that is up and coming.
Huh. That's super cool. That is what an amazing case study, and just in general. And I think this idea that I think you discovered was almost, and how I think of marketing in general is like marketing is almost like the first product of the organization. And I think customer marketing can influence this, product marketing influences this as well heavily, but it's almost in content, right? It's almost like in community and all that fun stuff, thought leadership. But if you can take all of your ideas, your thought leadership, your subject matter expertise, your point of view, all that fun stuff, package it into content, community, evangelism, connecting with folks, that is like, it's a pre-product to the actual product you're selling. And it's one of the most efficient ways to go to market, I think, and have experience. Is making your product its own, you're marketing its own product, right? You think of it as a product that you're actually delivering value. They don't have to purchase it. You know, you're exchanging attention for ultimately value, right? Your customers giving you attention and for value. Super cool. You mentioned reference programs. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think people are getting tired of just hearing from sales and marketing, and they want to hear from actual customers. So I think there's all this kind of like noise, right? And I know a lot of people, and this slogan is all over the place, like break through the noise. And, you know, if you don't have the luxury of these platforms and these, you know, like intent data or like, you know, sending platform, for example, then how else are you going to get the attention of prospects? And I think that customer voice, those referrals, just, you know, having it just show up on your LinkedIn feed all of the time, and having those big customer quotes, that really, like, I think
so powerful.
It's powerful, and it has to be the norm going forward.
That's crazy. I mean, I think like reviews, I was doing some research for a separate project, but I was looking at reviews, and 99% of consumers, 99%, almost every consumer, researches online before making any sort of major decision. So reviews, community, I think like with the past 10 years, even taking a step back, like the past 10 years, especially for like B2B SaaS or just growth in general, it was a good time, right, for everyone. And we were able to throw money at the wall and grow in a lot of ways. And so the problem with that is, though, we weren't necessarily always thinking about the customer experience or how are we connecting with customers and leveraging them and building those programs. And I think now we're having to be more creative, to your point of like, hey, if you don't have the resources to invest in a lot of marketing, how do you move the needle? And just community in general, like having that advocacy and having folks that can connect within the community is just so powerful. I'm constantly, I mean, we get so many ads every day, right? Like the average person receives like 5,000 ads a day. Yeah, I think referrals, all that stuff, like, there's just, I think it's like the tip of the iceberg. Like a lot of other marketing channels have been developed. Yeah. A lot of the demand gen channels have been developed. I think customer marketing, one of those areas that we're like, maybe practitioners like yourself that do it day in, day out, have, see the full potential. But I think most people have only tapped into the full potential of customer marketing.
Beautifully said. Yes. Sadly said, but yes. Yeah.
Well, great opportunity for you and others to educate. I'm curious, especially in this market, going back to like, 2023, looking at the market, what would be like 5, or 3 to 5 in top of your mind, retention or expansion plays you could see customer marketing be used for?
I mean, the first one that just like jumps out at me is events. Events are back. And they're just so powerful because everybody right now has that, like, they're so excited to be back. And so it's not just another happy hour that you had to go through before COVID and like, I don't want to go. Now everybody's like super excited to go and super open, right, to meet new people. So, I love all of the events, right? Because I'm such a chatty Cathy and I'm very outgoing. And so I love putting on a customer advisory board. But the new thing that I'm doing now is a customer advisory board around like 2 p.m. And then afterwards, we're going to have, we'll have drinks and cocktails and stuff, but then we're inviting our prospects to come and have drinks with us. So it's just like getting your prospects into like an environment with your top advocates and the people who use your platform. It's
that's awesome.
Right. And that, any event that demand gen is throwing, always inject customers or, advocates. I'm in charge. If anybody at the company ever wants to talk to a customer, they go through me. Okay. And so I'm happy to set up the best person to go to an event, to talk to someone, all that good stuff. Another retention play or expansion, you said too, right?
Yeah, retention, expansion. Yeah.
Let me see here. Well, not to talk too much about direct mail, but I'm pretty sure the majority of SaaS folks understand the power of that and all of the creative things that you can do to get somebody's attention, to pay attention, to get that contract signed and all of that.
Throw out a couple ideas. I'd love to hear just what you've seen that's like, ooh, that's a cool, really unique.
Yeah, so I like the 2-part plays, right? So like right before the renewal, you could go ahead and send them champagne glasses, right? And they're like, oh, well, what do I put in this? And then once the deal's closed, then you can send them a really fancy bottle of champagne. So I like those. And yes, that costs a lot of money, but there are things that you can do that are relatively like very low cost, especially if you buy it at a high quantity, then the cost can be reduced significantly. For example, my favorite scent is, and this could be used in onboarding, it could be used as a renewal play, but it's a bag of Jelly Bellies, all one color, right? So take your 2 brand colors, like, right, ours is orange and teal. So it's a bag of Jelly Bellies, all orange. And then right in the middle is a teal Jelly Belly. And the messaging says, get ready to stand out with Sendoso. Something like that, right? So and I think those were like 86 cents. from the quantity that we have. So there's
I love that.
ways that you can do it. It's, as long as your messaging lands and sticks out in people's mind, like I think it, and I mean, come on, puns are so fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I love the combination because that in of itself, it's almost like whatever the tactic is or whatever strategy you're doing, it's usually a mixture. And even in that specific like gift, there's like multiple levels you had that literally and figuratively of like, you're going after, you know, there's an aesthetic appeal, right? Just like looks like, oh, that's pretty. And then you're like, oh, well, that's a contrast. And then you're going after like, they can actually eat it. That's enjoyable. But then you're also touching, you know, the pun and then the humor, and then you're placing your brand in there. And super cool.
Yeah. There's plenty of places that we can go down the rabbit hole. Maybe people who are listening, they work in highly regulated industries, right? They're like, okay, Leslie, the Jelly Bellies definitely will work on marketers, but I market to, you know, bankers or lawyers, and that just ain't going to cut it. And so what I would say to that is spend money on, well, highly regulated industries, sometimes you can only spend $25 with them. And so my kind of advice there is to spend money on the packaging, right? So like think Apple, when everything, you open it up and you're like so excited to get like your phone or your laptop, and everything is in its nook, and it's that thick cardboard that's just like super sexy, and like it's just looks so high quality, and it really brings that like, damn, this brand is hot right now, and like you know, just excitement around the brand and partnering with them or continuing to partner with them in the renewals. And then you can put like, I love that, a video mailer in there as well, or like a beer stein. Anyway, I love
that because that's even more. I mean, it's just an aesthetically appealing process. So to your point, you're associating, like Apple has done a great job of that. Other brands are doing a great job of that too, of just like associating your brand with, you know, just sleek and sexy is really what it comes down to. Like, but also just professional and cutting edge and all that fun stuff. But you're also, I think sometimes gifts for me can be, they're almost too over the top, where it's like, okay, that's either too personalized where it's kind of creepy, or it's like you're just buying my time, so it's not really special. This kind of is a sweet medium where you're like, it's not really a gift.
Right.
You're actually just trying to get my attention, but you're doing it in a really nice, like pleasant way, and professional, and just like, that you're just like straight to the point. It's like, hey, here's our brand, here's what we do. Maybe you add another gift in there too, or another level, but I like that. It's cool.
Yeah. And I would say one level above that are people who cannot accept gifts at all. And then that's where like the charity choice, we call it charity choice at Sendoso, comes in with those charity e-gifts. But another cool play is, and this would probably be for your target accounts, right? But to actually but give to a charity and then get a physical receipt and then put that in a note or an envelope and then mail that off. And then when they open it, they're like, oh, wow, she really did do that. Like it wasn't just an e-gift that I don't know where that money went. So just take the digital and the digital and physical, and then just take it to that next level. Like going to the heart, right? Getting to the heart. I don't care who you are. If you are someone who, you know, invented the moon, or a VP or a C-suite, like people care about their children. They care about their pets. So any personalization around that really hits the heart. And if you got to respond to that stuff.
I love that. And a lot of those things, most of those things I think you mentioned, you can do them at scale too. They're not something that you can't do a lot of, where you have to, but some of it you can. Super cool, Leslie. I think we need to do a part 2. So I'm going to get your commitment to come on and do a part 2, because we have a bunch more we could talk about and nerd out about customer marketing. How can folks follow you and connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, Leslie Barrett. And then, hey, if you ever want to talk Sendoso, Leslie@sendoso.com. Like I'm all ear. Like I love talking about direct mail, and especially how it, you know, goes into the sales cycle and all that good stuff. And then I have a newsletter if you want to go read those episodes. It's CMA Soulmate sam.substack.com. But we'll put all that information probably in the notes of this podcast,
Totally.
right? Okay, cool.
Totally.
Well, thanks for having me.
Perfect, Leslie. Thanks so much for coming on. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Hey, Sam Jacobs. Thanks, Sam, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Taylor. I'm excited to be here.
I don't think most folks don't need an introduction, especially in the B2B world, but Sam Jacobs is the CEO and founder of Pavilion. I've been executive member of Pavilion for over a year now, benefited from a lot. The reason why I wanted to bring Sam on was he did a deep dive into unit economics and how it relates to go-to-market, how it relates in 2023. And I wanted to bring him on to kind of talk about unit economics. What does it mean for go-to-market? What does it mean in 2023? And if we have time, he's going to share his screen and kind of go through his thought process, and it's super helpful. So first, Sam, to start us off, what is unit economics and why does it matter?
Sure. Well, thanks, Taylor, for having me. And a topic near and dear to my heart, and a topic I think more important today, certainly more important today than it was 2 years ago, for sure. So what are unit economics? Unit economics is simply a phrase that describes the relationship of the money machine in your business between how much you spend to get a customer, how much they pay you back, what it costs you to service them, and how long they stick around. So those four factors drive your unit economics. And what they tell you is effectively, is your go-to-market machine profitable? Does it work? Right? And that's really, really important. It's important not just because you want to know the answer to that question, you want to know if it works or not. And by work, I mean, it's just, are you spending the right amount of money and getting the right amount back? That's just simple business, right? That's just simple business. But why is it more important today than yesterday or 2 years ago? It's more important today because money is much more expensive now. And so there's an interest rate, right? We lived in a world of zero interest rates where asset valuations were being pumped up by central banks of the world, putting more money into the money supply and giving away free money through 0% interest rates, right? And even the Fed was out there purchasing corporate bonds and supporting the economy in that way as well. What happens through quantitative easing? What happens when that happens? That means that the cost of capital falls. And what that means is that it doesn't really matter how much it costs you to acquire your customer. The only real thing that matters is acquiring more customers. And so we come out of a world where it was growth at any cost. And again, the reason that phrase is relevant, growth at any cost, is because there was no cost, or at least the cost was significantly reduced relative to history, when typically there is a cost to taking people's money, and it's either the cost of debt or the cost of equity. So we move to a world where all of a sudden inflation is surging, we raise interest rates, valuations collapse, and now we're in a world that is not about growth at any cost. It is about growth at the right cost. And growth at the right cost is, in a world pre-venture capital and pre-globalized capital, right? Growth at the right cost is so that you can continue to have a business and not go out of business, right? So that's important, right? Make more money than you spend is good for personal finance, and it's good for your company. But it's also relevant because, okay, well, there might be periods when it's okay to spend more than you make, but you got to have a point of view on what's going to happen in the future. It's not a good idea to spend more than you make forever. You will go out of business. But you might want to spend more than you make today if you have high confidence that tomorrow you're going to make way more. And that's what unit economics helps you. That's the question that unit economics helps you answer, which is, okay, am I spending the right amount? And really, again, this is somewhat, theoretical and qualitative, but that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is that it is the marriage of finance and quantitative analysis with all of the soft stuff about your customers and whether they like what you're selling, whether they like your product. And really what it's fundamentally telling you, what the unit economic relationships are telling you is, do you have a product that your customers like and are sticking around for? And if you do, are you paying the right amount of money to acquire them? And those things are very, very important. And if that math is wrong, not only might you go out of business, but you might become unfundable. And they're, of course, closely related, right? The prettiest person at the dance, always gets asked out and might not need a date. And, perhaps the person that is less attractive needs a date. Companies that don't need the money might be offered lots of money, and companies that do need the money might not be offered any at all because the math of their business doesn't work. So again, fundamentally what we're talking about when we're talking about unit economics is four factors, right? Your customer acquisition cost, which is how much money it takes to spend to acquire one customer, how much they pay you back over time, that's your average revenue per customer, then what your margins are, meaning what does it cost you to service the customer, right? It's not free money when somebody buys your subscription. You got to give them stuff. So how much does it cost you to give them that stuff? And then fundamentally, the most important, okay, you're giving them that stuff, they're paying you money. Do they agree? Do they agree that it's valuable? If it's valuable, they'll stick around and they'll keep paying you. And again, unit economics is, okay, the amount of money, the difference between what they give you and what it costs you to service them, you use to pay back what it costs to acquire them. And hopefully it's much more than that. So again, it's just simple. It's not complicated, and but it can be intimidating for people that aren't used to working in spreadsheets and aren't used to looking at math. And it feels intimidating to say, are we in a place where we can invest more in the business? The last thing I will say is, again, it might be okay. It is the interconnectedness of these relationships. And what's the point that I'm making? The point that I'm making is, if you're in a subscription business and your customers never stick around, that might be okay. That might be okay if you didn't pay anything to get them in the first place. That might be okay. The problem is when you pay too much to get them. That's what we're trying to understand. What's the relationship between how much I'm spending, and of course what you're spending is not just paid advertising, it's not just billboards on the West Side Highway. It is your head of sales. It is your sales team. It is your sales development reps. It is the insurance that you're paying for your sales development reps. It is the licenses for all of the technology that they might use to get more productive, get more meetings, etc. It is, am I spending the right amount of money to get the right amount of return? Again, straightforward business stuff. Last thing I'll say is, again, in today's world, that math is more urgent. It's more urgent because if you're completely out of alignment, your business may be uninvestable. And that might mean that you are on a path to going out of business. And that's why it's really, really important. You have to understand. And I guess the last point that I'll make, and then ask me questions, Taylor.
Sure.
But the last point is that these are not static states. This is not a point in time and it's true forever. You can come in and out of being investable. You can come in and out of product market fit. You can come in and out of your business being worthy of investment, but then maybe only the right amount of investment. And you can say the business looks good, but it's not good enough for me to pour a ton of money in, but I can pour some money in because it looks good enough to do that. And it's about sizing your bets relative to the strength of your product market fit, which is a way of saying sizing your bets relative to customer satisfaction and delight.
I love that. And tying it back into the experience and what is the relationship to the experience the customer gets versus the profitability, and has to be a perfect balance of, if I'm hearing correctly, the business has to make money, but the individual, whoever you're selling to, also has to get a certain amount of value in that, and balancing that ratio out. Super helpful. Thanks for setting the stage. That's I love the background. I'd love to get into that spreadsheet because I think that'll be great to for us to kind of dive deep into that. And I think as we get into the spreadsheet, I'd love to hear just right off the bat, maybe what areas, what levers on this spreadsheet, as you talk through it, what levers are super important, and as the market has changed, what benchmarks, which we could probably talk 2 hours about benchmarks and the helpfulness of them or not. But I'd love to hear about benchmarks. I think that's also something to consider as if somebody is looking to raise money or is looking to grow, what are some parameters that they should be looking for?
Sure. Well, again, let's keep setting the stage. So the first part of the stage is that it's growth. It's not growth at any cost. It's the growth at the right cost. So we need to, the levers are, there's a couple levers, right? First thing you see here is total amount of bookings for this given month. What we're looking at is a workbook that we give to members of Pavilion that are taking CRO school. And what we're trying to help them do is to begin to play with the math of the profit and loss statement, of the financial statement, right? So let's take a given period of time. Let's say it's a month. We just booked $65,000. Okay, so one of the lever, and we have 8 new customers. Okay, so first lever is price. That's a lever, right? And there's plenty of situations and there's plenty of worlds where people really, really like your product. They just won't pay you enough for you to make to build a business around it. And sometimes you want to shout at the world and you want to say, no, we have product market fit. They just won't pay enough. And the answer to that question is, unfortunately, then you do not have product market fit, right? Product market fit is they agree that what you're doing is valuable enough for you to continue to exist as a company. So let's look at if we're charging enough, right? And it's not because sometimes you say the answer to this is to raise prices. Well, it's only the answer to raise prices if your customers will pay the higher price. If they will not pay the higher price, then again, you might have a beautiful solution, but now it's your job to figure out how to deliver it more cheaply. Okay, so first thing we want to look at is price. What is our average price? Well, it's going to be 65,000 divided by the number of customers we brought in, which you see in that row, and that cell B6 is $8,125. Okay, so basically we're charging 8 grand. Might say a different number on the rate card, but that's fundamentally the price that we're charging because that's what people are paying. Okay, we have a lever there. We can try and charge more. We can try and charge less. What's the second main lever that, and I guess there's kind of two levers, right? There's long-term levers and there's short-term levers. So let's look at short-term levers. The next short-term lever is how much you're paying your sales team, right? And how much you're paying to acquire the customer. And then you really have to understand, and this is work that we have done at Pavilion for our company, right? You have to understand, this is why attribution is so important. Attribution is so important because you have to understand, when I spend that dollar, is that why they're joining? Is that why they're joining? Or are they joining for a different reason? For example, and I talk a lot about, and recently particularly, I've got a new keynote that I'll be giving, at the Ascent conference in San Francisco. We're recording this, on May 17th. So by the time you hear this, it may be too late, but it's called The New World of Revenue Generation. And what is the new world of revenue generation? Put very simply, it's send all your best leads to a very small number of sellers and do not build large sales teams unless you can demonstrate that they can deliver 100% quota attainment. And just so you know, the stats that we see in our poll surveys in Pavilion indicate that most quota attainment's at 30% right now. 30%. So a lever we have, if we're getting any leads at all, a lever we have is have a smaller sales team. Send your leads to 1 or 2 people instead of 10 people. And if you've got 20 people, send it to 4 people. But there's probably a ratio of 5 to 1 unproductive to productive. That's back of the envelope when we're talking about benchmarks. But my experience is that in the aggregate, and that if quota attainment was 20%, it would be exactly 5 to 1. So if general quota attainment's about 30%, then we would say 3 to 1, right? You probably need 1 rep for every 3 that you think you do. That might be possible. Well, I would look at the math for your business, but the next lever would be, this is what you're spending. Now, down here is what we call customer acquisition cost, right? So this is what we're paying our sales team, what we're paying the marketing team, all of the tech that we might use, and then of course any paid acquisition, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, and then of course the most famous dumb investment of all time is your PR agency, sadly, to all of those PR professionals out there, but I've never seen this truly sing when it comes to helping people make money. But nevertheless, this is what this company is spending. Okay, so the next direct short-term thing that you can impact is your customer acquisition cost. Customer acquisition cost is just how much money am I spending to acquire the customer? And then the answer, the question that derives from that is am I sure that every dollar that I spend is the best way to spend that dollar? Could I spend less and still acquire the same number of customers? Or could I spend way less and yes, I'll get smaller number of customers, but it won't be proportional to how much I'm spending. Again, we're not talking about growth at any cost. Growth at any cost when money is free means even if I get 5 customers and I spend $100 and then I spend $200 and I get 6 customers and all of a sudden my math doesn't work, that's still worth it because it's growth at any cost. Any new customer is good and I'll figure it out later. That's not the world we live in. The world we live in is, can I spend more and get proportionally more relative to what I was spending? So first, the next thing we will do on our spreadsheet, and again, if this is a great advertisement really for CRO School, so thank you, Taylor. If you're not a Pavilion member, then sign up for become a member of Pavilion, and you can take CRO School either on demand as a non-executive or live as an executive member. But what we're doing here is calculating customer acquisition costs. Okay, we add in all the money we're paying the sales team, all the tech we're spending, and we're adding in any demand generation investments. Oopsie. Now that's total customer acquisition cost. And of course, what do we want to make sure? Well, it's per customer, right? So we want to divide by 8 so that we can figure out, okay, what are we spending per customer? Okay, so first of all, we're spending $6,421 to acquire the customer, and on average, they're giving us $8,125. Pretty good. That's pretty good just off the bat, right? We can say that because this is just to acquire the customer. 6,421 is to acquire the customer. So we acquire them for less than they're paying us back in the first year, and now we go to apply gross margin. So when we talk about gross margin, what is gross margin? When it comes to subscription businesses, gross margin is what is the incremental cost of delivering the service? And that could be customer success, that could be AWS hosting costs because I need to provision a new license for but there's a cost associated with having a customer. What is that cost? Okay, we've got the answer here. We have a great software business, very low CS team, not many people, mostly automated. We're using AI to answer all customer support tickets, all good, right? 80% margins, fantastic. So we're going to take 6,421, and we're not going to do that. We're going to take 8,125, and we're going to multiply it by gross margin, and we're going to get 6,500. Okay, so now, and this is actually the point, right? Which is that this revenue is not free money either, right? We get $8,000. It's going to cost us 20% of that, which is about $1,600, to service the customer. And what's left is what we have to run the business with, and that's $6,500. So now what we're really doing is we're comparing $6,500 to $6,421. And good news, $6,500 is greater than $6,421, which means we spend money to acquire a customer, they immediately cover the cost of what it cost us to acquire them. This tells us that we have a good business. If this number were 12,000, that would be if this number were 3,000, right? If this number were half this number, it would take us 2 periods. If we're measuring in years, 2 years. If we're measuring in months, 2 months. But it would take us 2 periods to be paid back. But this tells us we're paid back in under 1 period. Why is that important? That's important because you can take the money that they use to pay you back and you can funnel it back into growth. You can acquire another customer for $6,421. They pay you back another $6,500, and we keep doing that till this math breaks, and it will break because all channels dry up. But meanwhile, we've got a bunch of customers, and once they're gone away, once we spent this $6,421, as we just looked at, it only costs us $1,600 a year to service them. So this $6,500 is all essentially profit, operating profit or gross margin that we can use to run the rest of the company with. Okay, so then there's 2 big numbers that we look at when we're looking at unit economics. We're looking at payback period and lifetime value of the customer relative to the customer acquisition cost. And again, remember, that lifetime value is basically adding up all of the $6,500s that they pay us for however long they spend with us and comparing it to this $6,421. And so first thing we want to look at is payback period. This means how quickly do we get this money back? And we just talked about how this 6,421, this is cost, and they give us back 6,500, which means in under 1 period, we get our money back. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to divide 6,421 divided by 6,500, and then this is in months because we're going to normalize for months, which means we're going to multiply by 12. And that gives us 11.9. So we're paid back in under a year, and benchmarks, again, when you're paid back in under a year or under 1 period, you're doing great. You're doing really good. And what it's telling you is that you can invest back into the business, that's an investable business. Now let's look at our lifetime value. That's average gross margin, which is this 6,500 divided by this 14%. What does that mean? That means this is the total value of money that you're going to get after you service the customer over the lifetime of their relationship. It's 1 over the churn rate. The inverse of the churn rate is how long they stick around, times this gross margin contribution per customer. Okay, so again, and just think about it this way. If this number were, let's say 25%, right, then it would be 6,500 times 4. Let's make sure that that's true and look that it is true, right? 6,500 times 4 is 26,000. So, but the actual that we use in the worksheet is 14%. Here's the point. We collect $46,000 worth of gross margin cash over the lifetime of their relationship with us, and we only spent $6,400 to get them in the first place. So what's LTV to CAC? It is lifetime value divided by customer acquisition cost. There we go, 7.2. Is that good? The answer is, because we want a happy spreadsheet, yes, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. What are benchmarks? David Skock, the godfather of SaaS, pioneered 3-to-1. You want this number to be 3 times what this number is. I like between 3 and 5-to-1, but what it's telling you is that the business is investable. That's the point. The point is, and one of the people I look up to is this guy, Weston Gaddy. He's the general partner of Radiant Capital. And he says, growth is not a right. Growth is the privilege of companies with good unit economics. And that's what this ratio is articulating. It is a privilege to grow this much. And the privilege comes from customers liking your product enough and paying you enough that they stick around long enough that you can run the business with it. And now when you see 7.2, first thing you say is, that's great. The next thing you say is, can I spend a little bit more money to grow more quickly? And maybe I take this number down to 4 or 5, but I'm still doing well. This number goes below 3, you're in trouble. And if it's anywhere 2 or below, you basically don't have a subscription business at all. And we need to take another look.
Awesome, Sam. Thanks so much. A couple things that stood out that I'd love for you to dive a little bit deeper in. So as a marketer or a seller or somebody in the go-to-market teams, annual churn and gross percentage rates are not something you usually talk about a lot when you talk about marketing or selling. Those types of conversations don't come in. How can sales or marketing leaders really get a seat at the table when it comes to talking about gross margin and churn, when in my experience those things are kind of like, just give me your budget and run with your budget, right? When those two levers are super impactful.
Well, I think this is where, we hear so much about revenue versus sales or marketing these days. Revenue operations as opposed to sales operations or marketing operations. I think that phrase revenue connotes what you're talking about, Taylor, which is that there's a growing recognition that all of these things are interconnected, and that it doesn't, again, what are we all coming to terms with? We're coming to terms with the reality that it doesn't do any good if I'm in a subscription business, like the fundamental assumptions underlying the whole thing, and by the whole thing, I mean the whole startup economy, right? We got to understand why they're assumptions so that we can be sophisticated enough to have a seat at the table, right? So what are the assumptions? Well, we spend more than we make. We burn capital. Well, why do we do that? That doesn't make sense to most people. It doesn't make sense to my parents. Why would you spend more than you make? You spend more than you make because of what I just walked through, which is that in the out years, you're going to be paid back, but you need to have confidence about that. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that it doesn't do any good to acquire a customer if they don't stick around. That's what it means. So if you're a sales or marketing leader, you need to have a point of view. And I was literally, the first part of my day as we record this was in a board meeting, and we were showing retention by cohorts when people signed up for Pavilion. God bless you, Taylor. You're still a paying member. Don't ever cancel. But they were saying, we don't just want to see retention. We want to see LTV by cohort. We want to see are people behaving differently by when they sign up, and does that say something about your product? And even today, it 100% does. It 100% does. We had a sharp fall off in Pavilion in renewal cohorts from annual members that signed up in like the summer of 2021 that renewed in the summer of 2022, and the people that signed up for annual agreements in the fall of 2022 and renewed, or 2021 and renewed in 2022. Well, what changed? And it got worse. Well, what changed was that we got rid of local chapters, which we're realizing was a huge mistake. So we have to bring back chapters, meaning local communities, for you to feel plugged in to wherever you live, so that you don't feel like it's just one big global online university, but you actually feel like there's people in your city, in your town, that you can connect with, that you can form deep relationships with, right? That came out in the data. The point is, you want to sit at the table, you got to understand that you need to be looking at that. Because again, we don't live in a world where it's hit the number at any cost anymore. You got to be selling customers that want to stay. And that is that's everybody working together. That's not just one department. That's not just sales or marketing. Sales can sell. I could promise you, listen, Taylor, if you join Pavilion, you're going to get promoted to CEO within 6 months. We're going to have Evian coming out of the faucets in your house. You're going to get a Rolls Royce and you're going to win the lottery. And you're like, sign me up. Where do I sign up? And then 6 months comes and goes. You're like, well, that didn't happen the way that he said it would, and it wasn't really like that. And so you cancel. So the point is like, we all. The movement today is for, and that's really honestly like the point of Pavilion. One of the points, besides just helping you get where you want to go in your career, is educating on this subject. That here's how you're going to build a long-term business. If you can have the confidence to build a long-term business, you're going to have career longevity and job security in a way that if you're just like, they handed me the budget, they told me to go hire 20 people, I got to go hire 20 people or else I'm not sure what to do. You will get fired. They might get fired too, but you will get fired. And that's why it's so important that we all understand this stuff. What's the way to make sure to convince people that aren't on this same page? Maybe share the video of this recording. Third parties are typically the way to convince people if you're in some kind of emotional debate. But facts, figures, and data are the best way to have a conversation.
Super helpful. I love that. We get almost up on time here. 2 more quick questions. A land and expand model, in the sense of like, hey, we're going in with a smaller product and expanding later. How does that fit into your mindset in regards to unit economics?
It's works really, really well. Okay. And it can probably, starting small and growing big is fantastic. You just got to look at the renewal cohort. Sometimes people think that they're going to start small and grow big, and then it turns out that relationship is not quite as predictable as they want. The biggest mistake in general, right, that people make when it comes to, so if you have, let me answer the question. If you have a good land and expand model and you can acquire that land cheaply and then expand more cheaply, because it should be cheaper to expand than to acquire, you got a great business. And that's fantastic. And that's why, and not only do you have a great business, but you can spend more to acquire that because on a per customer basis, it's cheaper, and then expand. And that's why Snowflake Computing was so highly valued, because their expansion dynamics were so powerful. So that's awesome. That's awesome. What's the mistake you're going to make? The mistake you're going to make, which we all make when it comes to an N of not big enough, is that you're going to think your business is more predictable than it actually is. That's the mistake you're going to make. And you're being like, this cohort performed this way, that must mean that all people perform that way. And the answer is no, not really. They don't all perform that way. And the economy is at play, and it's a dynamic state, and things are coming and going, and new competitors are entering the space. And so the point is, I'm a huge believer in land and expand. Obviously, I'm a huge believer in anything that drives profitable growth. But I think you just got to be careful about not extrapolating big trends from small sample sizes.
Love that. Thanks, Sam. We're up on time here. How can folks connect with you online?
You can find me on LinkedIn, but also, you can find me within the Pavilion Slack. Taylor's an executive member. If you're an executive member, you can ping me anytime you want. But I'm on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/Sam F. Jacobs.
Awesome, Sam. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Taylor.
Bye-bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to the GTM.news show. I got Anthony Kanata here with Audience Plus. Thanks for being on the show.
Of course, Taylor. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I've been just talking just a second ago with Anthony about kind of how I've came across him and whatnot, and through different groups, communities, LinkedIn. He posted a bunch of great content around kind of this topic of owned media. And especially in 2023, as folks are looking for GTM efficiency, growth efficiency, kind of wanted to bring him on to talk about what is owned media, what's the significance of it, and how can B2B organizations leverage it. So let's just jump right in, Anthony, and talk about how do you define what is owned media and maybe what is not owned media, and kind of just laying down a definition for the audience.
Totally. Well, what's interesting, the more I'm learning about this space, is that owned media is actually a lot less about the media itself and a lot more about just this idea of building a direct relationship with your audience, building this intimate relationship where you as a marketer or as a brand are serving them through your content, through your digital programs, your events, whatever. And through that sort of exchange of value, they are learning from you. They are feeling inspired and getting educated within sort of the space that you're sort of operating in. And the exchange of value is they give you their email address and they want to hear more. They're subscribed to you and your brand. And you hit the nail on the head when we're coming into a year like 2023, where it's all about efficiency. the way we sort of thought about the marketing mix at a super high level, this is like less in practice, more in like the textbooks of marketing maybe we studied back in the day, was earned media, owned media, and paid media. And what we found is paid is getting extremely expensive, very competitive. And what we're finding is even those leads tend to convert pretty well because we fine-tuned those landing pages. But those leads are, in my experience, represent the cohort of pipeline that doesn't actually convert all the way to revenue, or at least not at the same clip as some of the other kind of cohorts. So we're seeing this almost rebellion against paid media happening. Companies like Airbnb publicly stated that they moved their search budget off of search and onto owned branded content, and they've seen even better results, much more efficient growth as a result. And then we have to look to earned media, and earned is sort of funky because we kind of think about PR and some of those earned components. I think, that certainly our relationship with like the press is changing a lot over time in the B2B world. But I think about this too through the lens of just rented channels in general. Think of social media, where we have our organic reach beholden to an algorithm that we don't control. And so if we if we put like the word link or heaven forbid, drop a link into a post on LinkedIn, we get, shadow banned effectively. Like we get a third or a fifth of the impressions we otherwise would get. And so from a social media perspective, just getting so much harder to get your story told and to reach your audience there. Then you think about search marketing, and through, I think SEO, it's a rented channel for us. We're beholden to Google's algorithm. And with that, again, it's getting just very competitive and so much harder to rank on search. And so people are thinking about, how do we think about search from a different perspective? And then finally, we think about, what did I hit here? Social search content networks like YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, where we distribute our content. Great for getting some eyeballs, but we don't get any engagement data, any real sense of, okay, who's actually listening to our stuff or watching our videos or whatever. We get just sort of web analytics data, like a aggregate number of listens or views or something to that end. So I think I say all of this, a very long answer to your very direct question, is we in marketing have to start thinking about these rented channels, start thinking about how we leverage paid, all for the purpose of building an owned audience, building a audience where we have a direct relationship. And through that relationship, we eventually, we nurture, we build kind of, we educate and inspire and entertain. And then over time, we convert that audience base into revenue.
Super helpful, Anthony. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, as I think about even just the past 10 years in B2B, and I actually kind of coined it as like, especially for SaaS, it's been kind of like the golden age of SaaS, right? Like plenty of money to go to market.
Yeah.
No one really was. It was just growth at all cost, right? And so we're looking at all these different channels you just mentioned. It was no one cared as much as they do now in regards to what is the return. And I think that's also, even the pandemic, we saw like at the beginning of the pandemic and through the first 2 years of the pandemic, there was, this entire move to remote work. And so people are using social networks more. And so actually the cost went down for a while. And then you got this interesting mix where we've had a really good, basically the past 10 years in a lot of regards. But now I think we've even seen even more competition in the B2B space. So it's more competition. There's, recession, the valuations, we have less marketing dollars. And so all those channels were expensive before, we just didn't care as much. And now I think, to your point, how do we get creative and think about it differently? And I really appreciate how you define to owned media being that relationship, being that building that subscription. Can you talk to me a little bit about how do you define kind of the difference, especially for the marketing audience and maybe for the non-marketing GTM leaders, maybe using MQL as a marketing qualified lead. Sure. How do you define what a subscription-based marketing qualified lead, how is that different from how we've looked at generating leads before? Totally.
Well, the example I've talked about often is what can we learn from, what industry can we learn from that's kind of had some similar headwinds? And the one that I often reference now is the consumer media industry, because they've had this idea of a subscription for some time. And for them, they are very active in rented channels like social and YouTube and all of these things, but they have a different kind of mentality for how they're using them. And so to quantify this for maybe certainly a marketer, demand marketer, but even for a sales rep, or somebody, on the rev ops side, the average conversion rate of a website from for a B2B SaaS business is something like 1.1%. And what I mean by that is the traffic that is then converting to a talk to sales call to action or request demo or try the product or whatever. It could get up to 2 to 3% for best in class. In consumer media, it's 10% is the average. And you're like, well, what is that? What is the gap? Well, they've realized when people are hitting their content through long tail search or whatever, again, much like people find our content in B2B, what they end up doing is kind of getting their interest piqued by the content that you're producing, and they want to hear more from you. And so they subscribe to hear more and to learn more and to kind of be fed more from that, narrative or whatever best practices that you're espousing or helping kind of create. And so it's a much lower threshold for people that care about the topic that you're writing for. And in so doing, literally the opportunity there is to 10x your web conversions. Now, I'm not saying go and kill your demo request button and turn it into just a subscribe flow, but what have we done to capture thought leadership subscribers in digital marketing? We've put it in the footer of we have this newsletter, subscribe here, or it's very difficult to find. And when we look to consumer media, a lot of companies are building certainly their performance content to drive SEO and all that, but they're creating a lot of content, some of which is gated not at the content level, but for people that want to become members of their audience. They want to subscribe to their thought leadership. You can get access and privilege to a exclusive podcast, an exclusive video series, an exclusive event, a live event that we're hosting. And through all of those, that sort of positioning of the subscription value proposition, you're able to better capture some of that audience that is, again, not ready to buy. That's fine, but they're getting engaged. They're getting deeper and deeper with your brand. And I think audience engagement is the highest correlated indicator to a pipeline conversion or revenue conversion down funnel.
Super cool. Thanks for sharing. I love that. And I love that comparison in content, even news outlets or other folks that are focused on just creating that user base, creating that engagement. And I'm curious your thoughts, especially the past, since it's been so focused on growth at all cost.
Yeah.
In your opinion, obviously generalizing the industries, but what are your thoughts on, have we focused from a marketing side, maybe even from a sales side? We've been optimizing so much for growth that we've forgotten about the relationship and building a relationship with folks pre-sale. What's your thoughts on that? I know you kind of hinted at that a little bit in a couple different areas.
Well, I think that the channels by which we've acquired customers traditionally in B2B were very transactional types of channels. Hey, let's just the biggest line item typically in a marketing program budget is paid media, which is typically advertising networks, right? Typically Google PPC and a few others, maybe display ad kind of retargeting, which is going away in 2 years, which is terrifying. And so that is the biggest program spend that we have, biggest line item. It's the one that's the hardest to defend. And again, from my point of view, at least three CMO runs, so I could be wrong, but always the lowest converting cohort of pipeline to revenue. And it's no surprise because we're trying to steal a conversion for someone and almost trick them into filling out a form so we can throw an SDR at them and call them 20 times until they, and email them 100 times until they unsubscribe. And that's sort of the status quo for B2B marketing. And I'm not saying outbound cold calling doesn't have its place in the stack. I think it's much more effective when it's not a cold message, but it's an outreach to someone that's an engaged member of your audience. But I think that's sort of this shift. It's we've dehumanized B2B marketing over the years. And as a result, in marketing, when we're signing up for a number to support our sales teams, we have it becomes a much cleaner handoff when these are folks that are warmed up for sales, where they're not just we're kind of super excited because a big logo filled out a form. somehow, some way. We send it to sales and they're like, not DQ, they're not interested. Like they're not, there's no initiative, there's no budget, there's no urgency. Like this is not even a real deal. So I think that's where the big opportunity lies. If we rethink the funnel through this lens of building an audience, engaging an audience, and then kind of getting a sense of as members of our audience are getting more and more engaged, then layering in the sales kind of component, it becomes a much more sustainable, scalable, cheaper way to grow. And I think, to your point, that a lot of the headwinds from 2023, a lot of these discussions with our CFOs, with FP&A, like they're just not going to allow for the whole, this is our biggest bucket of spend, and we can't clearly tell you if it's actually working or not. Like that conversation just won't work anymore.
Yeah, good. Excellent points. Thanks for sharing. I'm curious too, your thoughts on, we kind of talked about optimizing for sales, which is obviously super important.
Yeah.
But then from the marketing side, especially from the content creation side, you kind of talked about focusing on so for example, paid media, and you have it go to an ebook, right? You're curious your thoughts on, historically, we've optimized to get that download, right?
Yes.
How is owned media? How is the subscription model? How is this building the relationship? You're optimizing, instead of optimizing for that one event, getting them to sign up for the ebook, versus actually getting them to want to consume more content. What's the difference in mindset there?
I think the big kind of transformation here is not gating a piece of content anymore, but gating access to membership for your brand. And it's a different, it might be subtle in terms of implementation, but I think it's sending a much different signal to the market and using other language. Like typically, I think we're just saying sign up for a newsletter is really all we say. Or, on the back end, we refer to that as like an opt-in to our marketable database or some weird, dehumanization kind of moment. And I think that thinking about this as a subscriber, as there's connotation of relationship there. It's ongoing. It's not transactional around an ebook. Like, give me your email, I give you this one piece of content. It's no, we're going to commit as a brand to continue to nurture you, not just the audience at large, but our subscribers who have given us this exchange of value. And so I think that's a big evolution on the content side specifically too, is you're going away from just performance content. You can't get away from it completely. There is some table stakes content that has to happen to improve your organic search and all that. But this focus on editorial content across a variety of platforms, just like this one, in order to build a relationship and to serve them. And what we saw, I saw this most presciently, I guess, during my time at Gainsight, where customer success managers didn't have, there wasn't a brand in the marketplace that was sort of, running away with the market as the market leader. And so our hypothesis was not to sort of take this product-led kind of position, but rather we're just going to create as much content, whether it's us or inviting the community to create content on our platform to help educate and establish best practices and advance the interests of this profession, which goes so much more, beyond the software that we create. But it created this amazing flywheel, and over time, I think served Gainsight well.
Super cool. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I would love to dive a little bit deeper into in a second as far as the editorial side and getting the whole team and community involved in creating content. But first, just curious your thoughts on specifically kind of the performance content. I love how you framed it in that way, because what I've seen is that especially content historically, ebooks, kind of performance content where you're looking to generate leads. The focus is how do we get people to sign up, but you actually don't have to deliver, by definition, you don't have to deliver any value in that content because you've actually already got the sign up. So I'm just interested in your thoughts on you're creating the kind of a transition in creating content to get people to come back to consume more versus that one snapshot in time content that doesn't have to provide any value, really. The ebook doesn't. Whereas a show, the goal is to get them to come back.
Totally. And I think that's, speaks to this sort of evolution of your brand. Like, are you building a software provider or are you building a thought leader, a market leader, a brand that is committed to helping your audience effectively solve complex problems of which your products are a part of, but not all of. There's more, and I think your content, your community, your events, your experiences all kind of contribute to that. So I think that's definitely right. It improves a couple things. It improves time on page, time on site, because people are spending going to your page not just to buy but to learn, which is extremely helpful. And beyond that, as you sort of release more programs across all of those different formats, again, let's say you have a road show that you announce, or a monthly virtual office hours, or all of these different things, there's always something new for your subscribers to be tuning in. And, I think we might address this a little bit later, this idea of cadence, like making sure that we're not overthinking quality, but really focusing on constantly delivering new programs, and in a way that may not, in a way that's sized appropriate to your team. Like it might be one thing a week. It might be, 5 things a week if you have a big, content team. But the idea of like thinking about your brand as a network, almost like a NBC or whatever, where you have these shows, they come across on all these different formats. There's a newsletter, there's a video series, there's the written word, and that keeps people feeling like there's something new. There's a piece of new value for me to go and revisit. It also creates a sense of belonging, almost of I'm a part of this community where I am being fed around this topic that I deeply care about. That's going to help me in my career. So a very human kind of thing that keeps people, I think, coming back for more to learn.
I love it. And I think you're just hitting on like one of my favorite underused words, or maybe not appropriately used words in like B2B growth, is relationship. And something I think you said it earlier, we've dehumanized, we focused everything on growth at all costs. And so we've taken out that customer experience, taken out that relationship, taken out how's the person on the other end of the experience? What are they experiencing, right? Yeah. And it's all been optimized for leads and ultimately sales, which are great. But if you optimize for those things, you may not get either. And I love this approach of, hey, it's almost counterintuitive in a lot of ways of building an audience and using marketing as a vehicle to ultimately build an audience, and attention is everything, right? I think as marketers, we realize that. And if you keep people's attention, you can eventually nurture them into a further developed relationship. It's like you're basically starting a relationship, right? And I love that. Yeah. I'm curious because this is something that I have struggled in my entire career. I know a lot of other marketers struggle with it. A lot of go-to-market organizations struggle with this, is creating content. And I know you mentioned like cadence, and you mentioned even before this podcast we started, we're talking about, me starting this podcast, and you're like, the most important thing is just getting started, right? And I think that is just in the same vein of creating content is challenging, especially since we have like content proliferation, right? There's so much content out there. So I'm curious your thoughts on first, how do folks, get started with this framework, with this mindset? And then number two, you said it earlier as well. How do you get your community involved? How do you get the rest of your team involved? Because marketing, I'll be honest, marketing isn't always the subject matter expert. They aren't always the thought leader, right? They can be, but it's not necessarily inherent that marketers, for example, my day job, I work in the accounting industry. Our software helps accountants, CPAs.
Yes.
I'm not an accountant CPA, right? So how do I create content? How do I help our organization create content for CPAs and accountants? And then how do I bring in the rest of my organization, the rest of our community to create content as well?
Yeah, it's a great example. Yeah. So, we've been at this from a content creation perspective for about, I've been at it for 15 years, but me as Audience Plus for about 3.5 months, coming up on 4 months. We're a team of 2. And we've been trying to basically walk the walk and try to run a media company while on the back end, we're building a software company. And when I first started out, I was like, okay, if we're going to tell the world you have to be a media company, I need like chef's table for B2B marketers. I need high production, Netflix quality, because we got to set the bar. Like we're doing the thing, right? And it might have been like the millennial in me or something, but I was like, that's what we need. And so I reached out to an agency, and their quote after friends and family discount was $200K for 6 episodes. And it shattered me in the moment, because I was like, wait a minute, like how can we do this? It sounds like we can't, but beyond it, how can I, in good conscience, like tell the world you have to become a media company when it's 200K for 6 episodes at a time for like a video series? And thankfully, I was very wrong. So I had a good conversation with a friend of mine, and we talked about the Gen Z, this generation that's coming after us, where they grew up on content created on an iPhone. And for them, and I think increasingly in my generation as well, there's like, what people really want out of your content is authenticity. They don't want production, high quality production. In fact, high quality production could work against you because the content sort of comes across as a commercial, or as they're trying to sell you something, or something that's real and something that's much more authentic. So what we ended up doing, so I'm on a camera here. This isn't panacea, but it's less than $1,000 of equipment. It's an SLR, so great for like a home studio, that sort of thing. We set up a little office space in a residential apartment, which is kind of funny.
Oh, cool!
But we spent like $15K on equipment, and I'm talking like Black Magic cameras, like teleprompters, all the lighting, like whatever that rig thing's called. So, it's not, it actually isn't super expensive to go from 0 to 1 on content production. And when you think about it through the lens of authenticity, it takes a lot of the pressure off. And so when I mentioned like, just get started, I deeply mean that. Like, it's helpful for a couple of things. One, you put your show out there and you start to get feedback from the market. Oh, there's something here that's really resonating around your unique point of view, or the format that you chose, or the guests that you brought on, or whatever. And you're implementing that feedback back into the production cycle, which again is less about the camera and the lighting and much more about your unique story and how you're kind of presenting that story. And second, what I found is I've gotten a little bit better over time the more I've done this in 4 months, which is not a lot. But, I looked at the first show I did and I was a little shy and my heart was racing and all that. And over time, I've been able to, just build a bit more comfort just being in front of a camera. And I'm an introvert, so this doesn't come easy for me, but I've been able to kind of sharpen that skill a little bit in 4 months. So hopefully a lot more over time. So I think getting started is the most important thing. Now, to your point about activating the community or activating your audience to contribute, to be a part of this, I think that's a superpower over time, because again, we're representing a brand, and the brand is, maybe stewarded by marketers within the organization, but it's representative of the entire company. And I think a superset of the products that we serve. And so it's the products that we built. So if we want to go and build a media property or whatever around the brand, going back to this metaphor of thinking about it like a network is the most, I think, the most kind of compelling way to do that. And so if it's just us, if it's just me on stage behind the camera all the time, on the mic, whatever, that's fine. And, I better be good and I better have something good to say, like, people, in different ways. But it becomes this very powerful thing when you're able to get other people within your personas to share their voice and their lessons and their scars and everything that they're bringing to that shaped their experience, and tell that story through your network, through your property. And by doing so, a couple things happen. For them, they're able to have a platform. They're able to share their story, build their credibility in the market. They're able to build their professional brand. So there's a very powerful kind of opportunity there for them. And by the way, I don't think about it this way, but that could also turn into a partnership or a customer relationship or something too. Again, think about the relational kind of start there for that moment. But also, you're leveraging their brand equity, be they customers or not, to enhance the brand equity of your platform. So it's no longer just us standing on stage telling you how to be great accountants or CPAs or kind of find a work-life balance during tax season, like whatever, all these things. No, you're hearing it from the voice of the audience, and we are just the vehicle for that. We are just the platform by which that conversation happens. I think it's a very powerful idea. One, in the consumer world, I think they've understood, but not so much in B2B land yet.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I keep coming back, and I'm sure I heard this somewhere else, but this idea of curating versus creating. I think this idea of, even in my show, I'm not an expert on owned media. That's why I had you come on, and I want to curate the conversation, right? Versus necessarily having to create it. And it takes off a tremendous amount of pressure for me to be an expert that I'm not in, right? And I think that's getting past that mindset. And I think especially too when it comes to content in general is since there is so much content out there, being a curator, finding the best of the best, right?
Yeah.
And bringing those voices forward. So super good. Well, I know we're just about out of time. Thanks so much for coming on, and really appreciate you chatting. How can folks get a hold of you, follow your content?
Yeah. Well, not surprisingly, if you go to audienceplus.com, you can subscribe there for free. We produce a ton of content around owned media. So if any of this resonated with you and you're thinking about, okay, how can I build an owned media program from scratch? How can we scale and change our traditional content marketing into more of an owned kind of strategy? Encourage you to check that out. And I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's probably where I'm doing that's the rented channel that I'm spending most of the time kind of, activating. So in either place would be great.
Thanks, Anthony. Yep, it's worth the subscribe. I subscribe and enjoy your newsletter and also your shows and videos. So awesome. Thanks again. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you around, Anthony. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Taylor.
Bye-bye.